Yo guys, hello Coach AB here. I want to specifically talk about Twitch. Has a very outdated AD carry kit to the point where he either needs some type of buffs or reward just because also lethal tempo gets nerfed if you run lethal tempo and there is no real compensation to it as an example, right? So if you look at like I want to specifically, by the way, no talk about AD Twitch, no support, no random AP Twitch, of course, right? Basically his passive is quite useless, especially in short trades. Same thing applies, of course, to his E. In short trades, it's quite useless, but even in extended fights, it's not insanely rewarding. The reason behind that is very simple. There are champions that have similar abilities. You need to ramp it up to deal a lot of damage, but they are just simply better, right? Or they provide different utilities, such as Tristana's E has similar damage to Twitch's E early on, but it works on towers, so you can wave clear waves really easily, and notably it does scale with crit. I don't know why Twitch's E doesn't scale with crit or with something else beside AD, of course, because Tristana's E does have a bit more flexibility. While also notably it only takes 4 basic attacks, not 6, right? So for example, I play 6, level 6 Twitch in here, right? We have a dummy, right? And basically, I wanna, let's say, all in this guy, right? And we can see, of course, the poison does not deal too much damage. And alright, this is my E damage, 218, right? So with R up, you get like 218 damage on a E that you need to ramp up till 6 poison, right? Now, if you don't have R, of course, it's gonna deal significantly less. So it's very also R dependent for your. It's actually quite R dependent for your E to even deal damage, and Coup de Grace dependent, because without R, it doesn't even feels like you deal damage. Like look, it doesn't even feels like you deal damage. So that's another notable thing about your E. But let's move on. What the fuck is this ability? W. Now I know I skipped Q. We're gonna go back to that, okay? But what is this ability? 70 mana, so you're paying 70 mana for what? 13 seconds cooldown. It has a cast time for some random reason as well. And you get a 30 percentage slow. Right now, it does actually stack deadly poison, so we cannot say it's a useless zero damage ability if people hypothetically sit on it through the whole duration, or they don't have something like illusion or something that just maybe insta dashes out of it as an example, right? But it's rarely when you're gonna get the whole you won't always get the whole like duration of the poison off to even like ramp up Yuri, right? Which is again a problem because if you look at so many other modern AD carries, you look at Zeri fandom, right? As an example, we look at Smolder. Smolder needs to be buffed, of course, but soon the buffs will arrive, of course, on they're already on PB, I do believe, or even like Misfortune, right? I just like type down like few AD carries out of the top of my head, right? Like no Misfortune fandom, right? There's just few AD carries as examples, right? Look at Misfortune's E. Now it does actually slow more early on, and the issue with AD Twitch is you don't not gonna get extra slow value because you're not gonna max W till you maxed out your other abilities like EQ, right? So you won't get extra slow value. And we look at Misfortune. We notably see she has more slow. She does actually have AoE damage on her E ability, which is similar to Twitch's W, of course, in a way, because it does slow, right? And the other thing is that it just like it just like more likely that this will also hit because this also instantly spawns on people as an example, but whatever, let's move on to Smolder. Another champion very similar to that. Look at his Achu W. So that's slow. It actually does deal some damage. Of course, this needs to scale up, so it takes time for it to be useful. It does also bonus damage to minions and monsters. But that's just an example. We can go Zeri fandom as well, just to compare these type of like slowing AD carry abilities or CC abilities, whatnot, right? We can see that this has a very high AD scaling. The not too bad base damage, of course, it does slow up to 50 percentage. It can critically strike, right? Or it actually gets affected by crit, right? So it does scale with crit. And so I could like compare so many like this type of slowing or CC abilities that are basically basically similar to like the purpose of Twitch's W, but better because they don't only provide this weird only like slow opportunity plus some ramping up like true damage, which is kind of piss, right? So just as a comparison compared to modern AD carries, right? And it should have additional functionalities, this W, right? What does it mean? So one thing that would be on team with Twitch and would match him is that when you W in, it should shred armor. Actually, it would be interesting if it would shred armor because it also matches his like poisonous corrosive team, where Twitch throws a let's say like a corrosive flask, right? Where the let's say like the armor gets melted away basically from this type of basically corrosive poison, right? That could be argued, or he has some type of like Chemtech poison, right? That just melts armor. So that would be a on-team thing to actually melt armor because into armor your E doesn't even deal damage. I mean, generally your E doesn't even deal too much damage. So that would be a great thing to have. From the other hand, Twitch is not really a good anti-tank, right? That's why I say like it would be nice because it would be on team as well for this W to have a flat damage or perhaps a armor pen, right? So both of them would be great because I mean if you're throwing a flask at someone, it better be dealing some damage as well, like it would be nice if it would have some flat damage because in these days you're way too often forced to short trade just because of the bot laners that are getting perma played. So it would be nice if you would have actually some type of extra like flat damage armor pen on it, but these are just two examples I can come up with because these things would be really good on team because even so Borg values a lot if you actually your Kraken values a lot if you have some armor pen in your kit because if you notice many new AD carries in these days do have really good anti-tank capabilities uh, but that doesn't really apply to Twitch because he also falls off into a tank hard engage but he also can't really deal with tanks either, right? So that's like one of the issues with Twitch. So some anti-tank capabilities or some pants, some anything, like this ability is kind of a joke on an AD Twitch, right? Like anything, anything would be a decent buff on this. I would say flat damage, maybe armor, even so both. I don't care, maybe even both, because his kit is very, very outdated. Um, we already did actually talk about his E, of course. They did give a quality of buff change to his E, but it's still quite dog. I already said this ability is quite dog compared to like how much do you actually need to ramp it up for it to actually deal some damage, which is basically, this is basically an Ezreal Q, man. Just as a comparison, this is basically an Ezreal Q, but you need to actually stack it up now. Okay, whatever, let's move on. Could compare it to a Draven Q as well or something else, whatever. But sometimes the Draven Q does even more damage, but let's just move on from this shitty ability. Now, alright, so this does from 100 to 60 damage depending how many like targets did this R go through. It does give 300 bonus attack range, of course, and some AD, right? Now the issue with this ability is Twitch without R is useless in mid late game because his base kit is quite dog shit, right? Uh, his kit is just basically quite dog shit without his ult. Now, even so, his ult does provide him range, It does provide him range, right? It does provide him like 40 AD, right? And again, often people will buy items rounds to sort of combine it with, so you'll have some type of. People generally go for this build. I don't really approve to perma go rune second. In fact, rune second feels to be a bit illegal. Um, just because it doesn't really like provides any real amount of like DPS capabilities into a single target like Kraken would, and Kraken is quite heavily buffed. So for example, if you get it around a level, like build wise, of course, Twitch players are trolling their build because they don't go. It's even in recommended, so people get brain fucked. So Terminus is getting buffed, of course. Next patch, Kraken is still good even in these days. But arguably you could also even go in some games, perhaps the bruiser item itself as well on our experimental hexblade works super well in or it gives you extra survivability in solo queue specifically, right? So this does actually like help you a lot to like sort of survive, a bit. Like the speed used to be really nice to have, of course, because that will just allow you to just like stick to people just because like Bork's slow is lower, like very low these days, and it's only 1 second, right? So it would be a recommendation some games to maybe second item, it's just for that stickiness attack speed, super great item, more frequent or for snowballing, of course. um, But it's not even about the builds. Like, let's say you get the best possible build and you don't go for this random dog shit announce build that the game recommends you, that most of the Twitch players are going for, right? It's still not gonna be a good champion. Because like if you think about Twitch, like for example, they have a front line, right? When it comes to his R, like they have any type, like it doesn't even have to like pierce to like too many enemies, but if you wanna even like deal damage to the backline, it will always diminish because it pierces through so many units, right? So this can like diminish up to like it can actually deal like 40% less damage depending on how many enemies do you pierce through, right? Um, which is an interesting way to balance it in a way, but at the same time where it would matter to deal damage into the backline, because again you got like zero and Titan capabilities on Twitch, AD Twitch. It shouldn't be like so punishing to actually like try to access somehow the backline, because there is like someone that's like quite tank in front of you. Like it's already bad that tanks you can deal with tanks again because of their hard engage and you have like zero anti-tank capabilities. The issue is if they just sit in front of your art, they can like let's say like a Xin Zhao and the Ornn or whatever, sits in front of you and you can quite access the enemy backline, or I mean definitely don't want to walk into them, but if they just get instantly in front of you because they dash in front of you, they can reduce your damage by 20% already, right, depending how many units does this pass through, which is a bummer. Which is a bummer that it actually can deal less damage, spray and pray. Now, Runans, of course, later on I would argue that it may not be necessarily bad, because it's interesting in a way. Like Runans, definitely I can definitely consider getting it, whatever, like, but it's not really like build dependent. That's what I kept telling people. Like, it's not really like build dependent how useful the champion really is. I mean, sure you can go for a more useful, less useful build, but it's not really about like what do you build. It's just the champion is just like has a very outdated kit where I just wanted to basically like raise attention for. Now, one last thing I didn't talk about, right? Like, I talked about everything, but I skipped his Q. Because his Q is on team, right? Like, this Q band the same forever, and this has to do a lot with which is identity of how he works. Which this Q makes sense. So this Q I wouldn't change at all at most. I wouldn't, because this is like big part of Twitch's identity, right? It's not something you wanna change at all, actually, at most. So even if the kit would be reworked, it still needs to invisibility kit, right? Um, this is like the thing I skip because like basically there's not much that I really want to change into it. Maybe numerically it could be changed, but if the rest of its kits gets changed in some way, maybe. But again, it's just one of those type of abilities that's not the best if people buy control bar, so that's one way to counter it. And the other issue with it that if you can't really force out of your queue, then short trade wise this is like very shit because it provides you some attack speed, but as I said, like there are some champions that have matching or even more attack speed than you do out of a base ability. Now of course this one doesn't get an invis and speed up, but you guys get my point in a fighting scenario. So again, there are better attack speed abilities, but I just not talk about this because this ability is not mainly made just to have attack speed, of course. I does have some other utilities, of course, so that's a thing definitely. Uh, but I just don't know, man. Like, it just feels like in this short trading meta, like as a last thing, in these days there are too many like Kate Luxis, too many like mages on bot lane, too many short trading oriented champs like Smolder, whatever. Where Twitch was generally falls off into if you can't force an all in. The other issue is lethal tempo nerf next patch. Pork, the pork upfront slow is nice occasionally, but in other occasions you need a more extended amount of 3 seconds slow out of this, which kind of does suck because you don't have the same amount of board stickiness than before. That's definitely a big problem, right? To watch out for. And then again, like Kraken does actually like ramp up damage wise, so it's not necessarily bad. Kraken is still good these days, but I would just like really I would just like really just what just to, I just really wanted to point out as a final thing. I know I'm being repetitive, just the whole point of the video was like just to raise awareness, so make sure that maybe share this in the League of Legends subreddit or perhaps any type of ways. If this would actually reach a Rioters ear, that would be great for Twitch players. I personally don't play Twitch. just as I look at the champion, it's kind of an eye check to me how dog shit he is. And the other reason behind it is very simple as well, because enchanters are not that strong anymore. Yumi is not broken with Teach. Lulu is not that broken anymore with Twitch and whatnot. So this champion is also very like support dependent as well. That would really match his hit. Plus durability patch plus whatnot that did actually affect his champion snowballiness. So basically you guys get my point why this champion didn't age well. So that's it for now guys. No further ado. Have a nice day.